So if you're in a quiet
Here they
place, please unmute yourself. Let's see how we do with at least some microphones unmuted. I think it'll make a much warmer conversation.
Hands up if you've been told the protocol is to mute when you're not talking. Pretty much everybody. Okay.
Hands up who says exactly what you do.
We're breaking the rules here. Breaking the rules. We're changing the rules. Because if I, cough or sneeze or laugh, if it's a disembodied, it adds to that sense of disassociation. Whereas if you kind of hear me going like this, then there are some noises you don't want to hear. We're not going to talk about those just now. But on the whole, the connection between what you see and hear and all the rest of it, as long as there isn't dogs barking, tanks firing, or children crying in the background, then then go on mute. Yeah, especially dogs barking.
So let's quickly just reconfirm. Welcome everybody who either was welcomed in an abrupt way and you were quite surprised, or who is just now joining, and make sure we all know where we are. So today we are talking about how to disrupt the webinar. And if that wasn't clear, it should have been from your early experience. There is a course related with this particular session. We are planning to spend 60 minutes together. Now, our fabulous presenter, Judy is suffering from internet disabilities today. So we may end up with a couple of extra minutes as she works to unfreeze and freeze and unfreeze her way through this conversation. But our goal for today is to make sure that we share with you, Judy will share some of the fabulous insights that she and Steve McCann and their team have come about how to lead engaging online events. They've been very intensely working on this over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, specifically 3 simple moves that you can make straight away to escape your boring webinar formats. And I'm Elise, I'm your tech host. Judy is your presenter. Obviously the chat's open. Obviously we want to hear from you. We are recording, so there will be that at the end, and welcome to our event. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to see you here. I'm Judy Rees, and somewhere on your screen will be Steve McCann, who is my husband, my business partner, and together we are Rees McCann. You see our logo there, and we do stuff involving highly engaging online events. And we've been doing it since well before the lockdowns, but obviously the last year has been super busy for us, and we've learned a lot. So what we want to do in this chunk of time is to squeeze as much information and knowledge as we possibly can into the time available, while making it an example of what we teach. We want to make it super engaging for you. That means that there will be minimal chunks of me talking. There will be me talking because I've got information to share, but there'll also be lots of activities, opportunities for you to talk to each other and to talk in the whole group. If at any point I call on you to speak and you don't want to, or if we invite you to go to a breakout room and you don't want to, just pass, it's fine, but just say pass, or quickly message us and say, I can't join the breakout, something like that. We don't really want to leave people on their own in breakout rooms. It feels a bit awkward sometimes. So we'll do our best. I can't guarantee to keep an eye on the chat at the same time as keeping an eye on you and the group and on all the tech. So hopefully Steve and Elise will be keeping some kind of eye on the chat at the same time. But let's see if we can keep one conversation going. Everyone knows it's being recorded. With that, I hope that it's okay to just dive in and talk to you about these 3 simple moves that you can make to make your to escape boring webinars and do something more interesting. The idea is, here's the summary of the content. You can reach higher with highly impactful event design. You can step back to win yourself and your participants extra time in your calendars, and you can jump ahead by taking the easy route to fun, lively, and attractive online gatherings. Those are the 3 things. I'm just going to share in the chat the slides that you'll see behind me. So if at any point you want to follow along on another screen, or you want to have those slides for reference, they're available. Anything about the practicalities before we move on? And if I freeze, please bear with me. I'll do my best. Steve.
Rather than spotlighting, Judy, because there's so many people, if you're on gallery view, which we typically recommend so that you can get the sense of everybody, those slides are going to be a bit hard to read if your eyes are anywhere like as bad as mine. So if you want to, you can choose to go on to speaker view and see those big slides, or not, but up to you. But the other thing is download them, and then you can look at them on a separate screen and under self-control as you go along, either of those things.
The button for gallery view, speaker view is at the top right. Okay. Item 1 then, reaching higher with impactful event design. Over the last year, this has become our big message, our number one theme, that when you design an event with engagement in mind, you can do phenomenal things, and people will join in. People will do stuff. People will play with technology. They'll do all sorts of interesting things. But if you design out engagement, that becomes a problem. And it's very difficult to salvage the situation once you've designed them and basically turned people into passive recipients of information. 45 minutes of talking over slides without anybody being visible, and then you ask them for questions and you get a tumbleweed moment. That's not so good. When you design them well, you hold people's precious attention, and that means that the information gets across. When the information gets across, you achieve what people hoped to achieve by online events. You save money because you don't have all the costs of travel and venues. You make money because you can build the relationships that actually lead to people buying things, or in the case of a lot of our clients who are NGOs or large global charities, they're looking to get donations or continued donations from governments, from large philanthropic organizations like the Gates Foundations. But you need relationships to do that. And if you forget about relationship, then you lose your income stream. When you do this stuff well, you end up reducing risk, because it's actually safer to run events online, because the bigger things can't really go wrong. You don't have so many assaults and things that might happen in drunken conferences, all those kind of things. So you're reducing risk, and you're also saving the planet. Isn't that a good thing to do? Plus, you can meet with people all over the world and have just fantastic time talking to people who you just otherwise wouldn't get to meet at all. So all of that, once you know how to do an engaging online event, you can actually repeat the same formula over and over again, and it won't be boring. Because if you involve people and engage people, then the people bring the variety. It's much more fun that way. In a moment, just to prove the point, I'm going to ask Steve again to pop you into breakout rooms, this time of groups of about 3, just for 2 or 3 minutes, to talk about how might it be useful in your work to have more engaging online events. You'll have a couple of minutes to chat about that, and when you come back, I'll ask to hear, not from everybody, but just from 2 or 3 people who've got something they'd like to share. Steve is busy pressing buttons.
Good to go.
Are we good to go? Okay.
3 per room.
The rooms, about 3 per room. And then if you can't join, then hopefully there'll be a 2.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, I think we've got everyone. Welcome. What are some of the highlights of the conversations you just had? I'm going to call on people. John Barron, you look like you're about to say something. You're muted, by the way. Everyone's muted.
You're muted.
Do you feel free to unmute yourselves again?
I'm free now. I'm unmuted. So, well, it was quite funny because in my little group with my new friend there, we were talking about not being able to wing it anymore, that one can't get by on the same kind of charisma that you might do if you were playing to a room full of people. You know, now you have the screen with all these little pictures of people from around the world. So therefore, it's certain things, you know, you can't rely on, you know, movement and gesture so much because we're much more contained in these little pictures. So therefore, really wanting to know about ways of engaging more, but within this new format that is new to all of us, certainly in the past year or so, given what's been going on. So those are the reasons we're to find out more. So back to you.
Thank you. Who's got something different to that?
Well, I'll speak up. Graham and I were having a wonderful discussion about the looking for more ways to quickly build rapport, but not just speaker to group, but group, you know, participant to participant. How do we do that? And that sense of individuating people. We're not just a group of boxes on a screen, but each of us has a backstory and a personality and you know, what's the meaning of this in your life? Why do you have a plant? I mean, you know, just those kinds of things that help us know that we're in a group of real individual humans and not just a bunch of Brady Bunch boxes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one more person who'd like to share something from the conversation just now. A bit tempted to call on Athena because she's eating a burger.
I'll go. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, go on. No, go on, Donna.
Thanks. I was just going to say I work for a national association, and our members are all these nonprofits. And one of the things that we value is peer learning. And it's really, so even if we do some sort of presentation, it's really important for the people to talk to each other and share what they're doing, because they're all going to learn from each other and then hopefully follow up with each other afterwards and be able to repeat, you know, do some replication. So, and then, you know, I mean, we've used small groups before, but there's always that little question for me is like, what's the right size for a small group discussion, that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and we could at this point go into 20 minutes about how to use small groups and how not to use them and all of that. Top tip, don't make them smaller than 3 or larger than 5 in the early stages of your event. Pairs can be quite confronting. If you go larger than 5, you're not in a small group breakout anymore, you're in something else and it needs more facilitation. So there's so much that could be said about using breakouts, but what we've found is that they really humanize the event. Actually having a conversation with another human being is deeply compelling and deeply engaging. Now, there was somebody else who spoke just as I called on Donna, and I didn't see who it was.
Yeah, it's me.
Hello.
Hello. This isn't something that was said in the group because we were kind of providing some advice to Andrew instead. But one of the things that I found really useful, our organization as a whole is really focusing on becoming much more of a networked organization, that team of teams model. And engaging online events are an absolutely fantastic way of building cross-departmental, cross-organizational, cross-country, cross-continent networks by getting to know the other humans in your organization. It is incredibly powerful.
And there's a magic in combining these kind of synchronous occasions where we're all online at the same time, we can talk in real time, with written tools and other asynchronous tools like chat, like Slack, all those kind of things, which enable us to become more and more human to each other. So have I actually physically met you, Gordon?
I think we have met. Yes, we did,
have
because
met
I
once.
came
We missed a
along
meetup,
to
didn't
a
we?
physical event. It was a clean language
Yeah.
meetup that you did. Yes.
Adventures with Agile meetup. But an awful lot of people I think I know. I've never met Elise in person. I would regard her as a friend. But mostly we've met in this kind of environment, or in writing on a Slack channel, on LinkedIn, various social media. So we can build human relationships even when we never meet in person. Now, I'm realizing I'm drifting off the topic and wanting to get back into our 3 simple moves, or we won't squeeze everything
watch
in.
this, everybody. I'm going to suggest something and see if Judy gets cross with me because we're going off track. But she did something I wanted to, I'll get slapped later. She did something that I want to draw some attention to. She asked a specific question: who's got something different to that? And I'd like to draw a parallel between that question and the inclusivity piece, because I think inclusivity, anybody who knows me thinks that's absolutely, when we leverage inclusivity, I being welcome equally to everybody here, whether they're an old friend or a new friend, that's when magic can happen. When people are accidentally excluded, perhaps if Elise and I, as good mates, are chatting away, Thomas there, who's perhaps, or I just picked a name, Andrew, anybody who isn't in the gang, as it were, can feel digitally excluded. So it's really important that Judy used that question. Who's got something different to that? She's inviting differences. We have to celebrate and develop those differences and make sure that we don't online the habit of mainstreaming and collapsing in on the most popular or obvious leader person's ideas. So that's just a little thing she did in the background I wanted to mention. And
we'd already started to move on to this step back to win yourself and your participants extra time in your calendars, because one of the first thing I want to say about that is the magic of online enabling you to shift the conversation so that you can do more preparation and more follow-up work outside the live conversation. People complain that online meetings take up more time than in-person meetings do. It's not true. For the same amount of content, they take up less time because you don't have traveling. But what you do have to fit into the time box of an event like this is the sort of gathering and closing stuff that wouldn't happen. In an in the room event, all that would happen just outside the time box. So people would be saying hello to each other in the lobby in the 10 or 15 minutes before the event, and then someone would go, "Come on, everybody, take your seats," or whatever it would be, and get started. Online, we can move more of that stuff into things like Slack channels, Teams chats, all those kind of things. Then, when we actually do come together live in real time, we can make it matter. We can make the time precious together and do the worthwhile thing. See each other as humans. Discuss the really important things. I think over the last year, a lot of us have discovered that things that we thought definitely couldn't be done online, definitely could. I've been in this game long enough to remember a time when things like coaching was said, of course you can't do coaching online. Of course you couldn't, as a manager, do an appraisal conversation online. And so on and so forth. We've discovered that, of course, you can. And it was discovered that you could do those things a long time ago, but an awful lot more people are aware of it now. The other big advantage of online is that you can use the magic of things like social media to stay connected, to strengthen the ties between the human beings in your group, and also where you're sharing information, to strengthen your message, to amplify your message. So it's much easier in this environment for me to say, here's the link to the slides. You can look at those later. Now, that link to the slides includes things I want you to see, such as the link to the new course that we're launching with Elise on her meeting school. So you've got that information already, and we can easily send you that immediately after the call as well, and we can send you a recording. Not many people actually look at recordings, but it's there. We can amplify our message, and we can do things like create an edited version of the recording, or indeed as Elise does, we can do a transcript. All different ways to amplify the message and the things that we want you to pay attention to.
If anybody does watch this recording, I'm inviting you to email me, steve@reesmccann.com, and tell me, because I don't believe anybody ever looks at recordings.
I know for a fact in our events that's not true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
I
I
look
get
forward to the
ratings and
deluge of
email from
emails.
the 100 people who are like, it's
Yeah.
midnight here and I will watch this later.
Okay. I believe everybody intends to. I'm just not persuaded they actually do more than 10% of the time. But just plus 100, something Gordon said in the chat while you were talking, Judy. The preparation element for online stuff is use the time to prep, because so many people, because it's so easy to call an online meeting, they call them, they don't prep, and then they start bumbling on. You're 15, 20 minutes in and they said nothing of any use or value. Attention diverts and people lose interest. So absolutely be on point before you get there. Honor people's presence with useful stuff, not something that could have been in a short Slack message.
Okay, you're going to be back in breakout rooms in just a moment. I've done it, Steve, it's okay. While you were talking. You're going to be back in breakout rooms in just a moment. And the question is, what are some of the examples of good use of the internet to amplify your message and strengthen relationships that you've seen? One or two examples. I'm sure people have seen some good stuff. And if you can't think of any great examples, then let's hear some really bad examples of how not to do it. Once again, you're just going to have a few minutes to exchange ideas, and then I'll call you back. You're mostly going to be in threes. There are a couple of pairs, so fingers crossed this is going to work. Opening the rooms now. Welcome back. Do please unmute yourself if you're able to. And let's just hear a couple or three examples of good use of the internet that you found yourselves discussing. Sophia, you look like you've got a story.
Do I? So it was interesting because it was three very different answers. We talked about social media that can amplify one message to many. And then we talked about the one-on-one meetings, as in Lunch Club, for example, where you create deeper connections. And then you can also amplify this message, even if it's in one-to-one. And in this one-to-one too, we talked about how meeting with clients is easier with Zoom online, because you do save time, and for a client or a prospect, it's just you do save the time and the hassle of booking the meeting room, etc.
Thank you. And Sandrine, you had something to share?
No, I actually we had a really interesting conversation, and we shared the good and the bad, and the good for me was really the fact that I really need to connect with my clients. Part of my work is to understand them, and there's a lot of body language, that needs to be interpreted and used on both sides. So I think for me it's very useful, but I really miss my clients. I would like to see them personally and physically. So yeah. And then my other the other persons in the work group said it's from time to time, it's not necessary to have a meeting through Zoom, and particularly if the connection is really bad, and that can be actually quite disturbing. Or if there is no engagement whatsoever, then it's boring and it's a waste of time.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Is there one more person who has something to share before we move on?
I'm going to share Hella's comment on her behalf if she doesn't want, if she's not going to unmute. Because she was saying about there's one particular person she follows who's kind of basically saying the same thing each time. She's heard him tell the same joke 3 times. And it's just like, this is not interactive. This is just broadcasting at people. It's not a conversation.
That's the point about the internet, Gordon. And I might just prove myself a little bit. See if you can spot the irony. 2 kinds of people in the world: want to be understood, want to understand others. The want to be understood broadcasters love this place because they can talk. It's not engaging.
Nobody's listening.
If you actually use this medium to ask questions, directing questions out of curiosity, engaging.
Great.
So just to squeeze in more talking at you, my item 3 is that jump ahead by taking the easy route to fun, lively and attractive online gatherings. How can we do all this and not have our heads explode? Let's figure out how to do it easily and straightforwardly. So some of the things that we found work really well. Number 1 is use checklists. So absolutely, a lot of you will have seen the research about how checklists have transformed safety in the aviation industry and also in surgery in hospitals. In both cases, the high status individuals, pilots and surgeons were basically saying, we don't need checklists, we can do all this stuff on the fly, but they still kept sawing the wrong leg off. And it was costing millions in malpractice suits. They introduced checklists and the number of mistakes dramatically fell. So we strongly recommend using checklists. Also, relatedly, have a detailed plan for what you're going to do in your session, and share it with your team. Now, in this particular instance, I've shared that plan with Steve, but not with Elise, which is a bit my bad, really. But it does exist. We do what we say we're going to do. And what we love about it is that it enables us to be clear who's doing what. In this environment, it's not like the old days where in person, where everybody knew whose job things were. If there was an AV technician, you knew that what they were going to do. You knew that the speaker, all they would probably do would show up and speak, and so on. So having a plan that shows who's going to do things helps us to navigate this changing, varying online meeting world, and it makes a really profound difference. And the great thing about doing all of that is that you can avoid the common pitfalls and the major catastrophes that can go very easily, very badly wrong, very quickly. Some of you may remember this cat. The cats were busy trying to take part in an online trial when their human filter suddenly failed. And they were suddenly exposed that it was cats prosecuting somebody. And the cats will never live it down. Things can go wrong, but it is possible to avoid them by making sure, as Gordon is saying, you've got systems, you've got processes, you've got checklists, you've got plans. Make a system and things are much less likely to go wrong. Now, this is where I do my quick plug. And before we get to the Q&A and invite questions, and there is going to be another breakout group before we get to questions. So quick plug, as I said earlier, we've got a shiny new course on Elise's meeting school, the Engaging Online Events, the complete step-by-step guide. Now, this is where we've put all our best advice for running highly engaging online events for anywhere probably between 600 and 500 people, but we talk about between 12 and 300 because we don't want to try and claim too much. All our checklists, all our best advice, all our plans, the systems that we use, squeezed it all into a single course, including videos, documents, links to different things, spreadsheets, all the rest of it, and it is available now. In a moment, I will share the link to that and a link to the course once you've done the next breakout. So Steve, could you be lining up the breakouts? In this next breakout, you have an opportunity to chat in a group of 2 or 3 about the questions you have. Then use a tool called Mentimeter to gather up the questions and see how many we can get done before the end of the call. Steve, let me know when you're ready.
And just making sure we've got 2 or 3. Yeah, we have 2 or 3 ready now.
Okay, please open the breakout groups. Oh, Elise was going to share the question in the chat. What are some of the questions you have? Is everybody back?
Oh my goodness, it sure looks like it. Look at all those folks.
Yeah.
Hi.
Welcome back, everybody. So, two things. I've just shared in the chat. I've shared the link to how I'm sharing my slides behind me. I know there are other ways. Prezi is one that Gordon was looking at in the chat. The other thing I've shared is a link to Mentimeter, where we use this tool, Mentimeter, to gather up the questions. So please go to the link that's in the chat, or go to menti.com and use this code that you can see behind me and also in the chat, 58992483. And fingers crossed, we should gather up some questions there. Let's see if we can.
Yeah, the Menti link, it looks as though it's tied in with the slides link. So there is a click-through link above at menti.com/H9TUNU, etc.
Okay, so as people add questions to the Mentimeter, you can also vote for your preferred questions if you want to thumbs up, or if you want your kind of question to rise to the top, then thumbs up it as you look through the list. So we can see we've got a fair few questions already taking shape. So I'm not using, so I'm going to answer that one. I am not using Prezi Video for this. I'm using a thing called MMH.
Judy, this thing where everybody's muted when they come back in the room, you don't normally set it up like that. Is that something Zoom has imposed, or is it just an accidental setting?
It's Elise's setting.
Ah, oops.
She's the boss.
Yeah, so if I had a checklist.
You're driving Judy crazy.
Sorry
not
about
the Judy A.
It's a short trip. That's okay, Elise.
You know where to go and do the damage. Yeah, okay.
I can handle it. I'm the youngest of 4 kids.
So I'm busy playing with this display and seeing if I can get the questions large enough to properly be seen, but I think it's too much of a struggle. So I'll do my best to read the questions out and answer them in the same. So number one question, are there any techniques for handling large groups apart from using breakouts, particularly to enable maximum engagement and involvement? How can virtual reality be used to enable better interactions? Now,
how many questions were there in there? I think virtual reality is still one for the future, personally. Until we can actually get faces as opposed to avatars, I'm not at all persuaded that it works in that human-to-human engagement. The I see you piece of respect and contact with people, I'm just not so sure myself.
Yeah, I'm not quite convinced about virtual reality yet. But meanwhile, there are lots of techniques for handling large groups. So using tools like Mentimeter can be really very compelling. I'm a bit rubbish at it at the moment, but you can really get people to join in. You can do things like creating word clouds, those kind of things. Other things you can do in Zoom, because you can get everybody to put their cameras on, you can get them to do things. So you can get them to draw a picture of something and hold it up to the camera, or bring an object and hold it up to the camera. You can get people to use the chat. And of course, there are lots and lots of, as people are saying in the chat, there are other tools apart from Zoom that enable different kinds of breakout conversations and people to move themselves around from conversation to conversation. Let's move on to the next question, see if we can get another couple answered. So how do you make your meetings as universally accessible as possible in terms of not excluding disabled people? Oh, one of the things we found quite early on in lockdowns was that online was much more accessible to disabled people than in the room. We did a big community event for a group down in the south of England, for a council down in the south of England, and they had more elderly and disabled people join the online event than they'd had the previous year when it was an evening event in a local leisure centre. Because people who are disabled often have real challenges with travel.
What kind of disability is probably a good question here. I mean, the really disadvantaged now are going to be the digitally disabled. People who cannot get accessibility or have the quality of access and material and reliability. We know that's the big one. But in terms of accessibility and disabled, I mean, I would look at accessibility above disabled, because there are lots of differently able people, and actually this means, as has been described, is actually much more open, perhaps to, part-time caregivers or people who are culturally restricted to a certain compound. Accessibility via this is far higher. So we've just got to look at the map and see what it looks like. Karen, no, somebody else, Diana, mentioned something I wasn't aware of, which is an online signing piece. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that, that was stupid, but sign language for people with audio impaired. So tech can come in and help and support stuff like that. But the most important thing is to create psychological safety and inclusivity in the way you set up your piece. How you set out your stall.
Next question. What's a good proportion of time for cameras on versus cameras off to combat Zoom fatigue? I'm going to say that the best proportion of time is not about cameras on versus cameras off, but time on and time off. Actually, people are human and they need breaks between meetings. That didn't seem like rocket science when we were in rooms together. Why is it so difficult when we're online? Build in gaps between the meetings and the Zoom fatigue goes away. Now, of course, there are bits and pieces that you can do to make it less stressful, such as not looking at yourself, so hide your own view. And there are a lot, those kind of things will make a difference. But expecting yourself to sit online on video for 8 hours a day with no gaps is not a reasonable thing to do.
So Judy, can I ask a follow on to that though? I mean, I'm actually, that was one of my questions, and it actually, and I've learned that it has a lot to do with Zoom fatigue. And as a presenter, I don't have control whether people had a meeting immediately before mine or immediately after mine. And so I'm concerned with the time I have. That's what I was thinking about. If I'm with them for 2 hours, is there some ideal split of showing yourself versus having time to not show yourself, work on some other kind of activity? Anyway, I don't want to take up everybody else's time.
If I've got a 2 hour chunk, I would definitely put a break in the middle of it. Of 5 or 10 minutes to
at least one break. We'd probably have a break every 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's less about turning off the camera and more about letting people move and encouraging people to move. That makes a huge difference.
The reason why we're so keen on the indivisibility piece is when somebody is not present and you can't see them, right? A number of things. One, a dark screen there in terms of psychological safety of the group. It might not matter so much today, but in a small group talking about other stuff, if I can't see who's there, it's a barrier for me. That's why I always wear a headset, so that you're talking to me, not the people that you can't see behind there. In some contexts, that will matter more than in other times. The other thing is people are sat at their distraction station. If you think I'm wrong, put my hand up. But how many of you, honestly, haven't been on a meeting that's been a bit dull and then turned your camera off and started catching up with emails and doing the shopping? Every single man and woman here has done that. Every single one of you. And the price of that disengagement is a downward loop of attention. And attention and engagement are the nectar, the prize of online engaged events. So I do understand what you mean about Zoom fatigue. And I think there are other answers about breaks, about when it's one-to-one, just use the phone.
Now, I'm going to
But the
say we've
downside
got
of not having the difference between I can see you and I see you. Sorry, we've got 1 minute left. I'm going to stop talking. It's a longer conversation and one I'm very interested in. Another day.
Yeah.
Stop talking, Steve.
So-
We're running out
So
of time.
speaking of longer conversations, I'm gonna. Those of you who have been to our events before know that while we have these active questions, we will stay. We'll stay for up to 10 minutes afterwards to continue that with anybody who wants to continue and stick around, because it's like we were in a room, right? And we have that milling a bit, but we are going to end on time because that is one of our commitments as meeting effectiveness masters. So for those of you who are curious about what happens next, number one, we would love feedback. Feedback is the way in which we all continue to get better. The link is right there. Might as well multitask on task and fill out that feedback before you forget what you thought. We would appreciate that enormously. You will receive from us within early next week the edited recording, the chat transcript, the audio transcript, links to this course, which is actually right there as well, and anything else we can share with you. And then should you like to come and play in completely radically different ways every time, our next couple of events are also listed there. So these are all, again, open free workshops. And I thank you very much for spending your time with us and look forward to seeing you at a future time if this is indeed your opportunity to say goodbye. And for those of you who are going to stay, we look forward to continuing to chat for a few minutes.
Thank you very much. It was a great session. Hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terrace.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Those of you with a day ahead of you, enjoy it. For those of you with an evening ahead of you, cheers.
Well, my wife is sitting at the other end of the table doing an online art class, so I'm not going to get any sense out of her for probably at least another hour anyway.
Never gets any sense out of you at all, Gordon. So
well, this is fair. Most people don't. Most people don't. I mean, what I would say about kind of picking up on that camera on, camera off, one of the reasons I love a Bluetooth headset, and I know there's issues and always have it wired, and I can use it wired, but it's the fact I can get up and I can go and make a cup of tea, or as I was doing earlier on, I can be putting washing in the airing cupboard and refilling the cat litter tray while still listening to and contributing to what's going on, especially if I've got this headset on, because it's a noise cancelling mic and I can have actually quite a lot of background noise and you won't hear it. So yes, I take the opportunity, depending on what it is, kind of daily stand-ups and things, I'll just get up and wander around, go make a cup of tea, and that helps.
Yeah, or get a watch that moans at you and tells you to stand up every 45 minutes if you haven't stood up.
I mean, I've always been a fairly committed cameras on person, but recently I've been seeing discussions online, articles online about just about the whole accessibility, for one thing. For some people, it's very difficult to be like neuroatypical people, to be staring at this sea of faces and to know that other people are staring at their face can be very difficult and off-putting for them. So needing a lot more breaks for that. And then the most recent one was this article I read about the constant being on camera, constant having your picture up for other people, that contributed to Zoom fatigue for some reason, particularly for women, because women are always, there's this I don't know, condition, syndrome, whatever, that women tend to fall more prey to, about seeing themselves in a mirror and not being able to just sit and sort of pretend like you're seeing yourself in a mirror, but then actually how distracting it is, how much you're aware of how you're coming across and how all these different things. So it's been on my mind lately about, is it just because I'm comfortable on camera, because I've been on camera so much, I can't assume that everyone that's with me in an event is going to have that same level of comfort, and they may
it's not
need
digital,
more brain.
Diana.
Yeah.
It's not digital. There is no one right answer and wrong answer.
Right.
What we
right.
do know is that the downside of do what you like, cameras off, is that people will, for a multitude of reasons, some of which are you've just described as being significant to the individual, and some of which are frankly bullshit.
Yeah.
Cameras will go off while they do whatever they want to do, and then you get into this. Two things happen. One, the individual disengages, can typically disengage to some extent, and when that happens, the entire quality of the gathering starts to go down the pan.
So also, just to be clear, this is about planning time for cameras off, asking people to have their cameras on, but having built-in activities, time-defined activities with an output, where turn your camera off, go draw this picture, go respond to this, write this essay question, what, I don't know what all. That's a challenge, is figuring out what those might be. And then come back and turn your camera back on and do the thing. So it's, sorry, but that's.
People are not, if it isn't conversation and engaging and they're doing something separately, I say cameras off, just do it, because it gives you that break time that you're talking about. No argument there at all.
Right.
Yeah. And I do definitely agree. It is much more about time on, time off, rather than cameras on, cameras off. And to repeat what was said earlier on, what massively helps, and unfortunately some platforms don't allow you to do it, Teams, is actually turn your self view off. That helps massively. I often say when I've spoken about this, if I was talking to you in real life and held a mirror up beside me whilst you were talking to me, you would rapidly feel conversation fatigue. That's actually the problem for the majority of people, is having to look at their own image, because you forget, whatever else you're doing. We used neuroatypical is a different conversation, but for most of us, we're used to other people seeing us all day long. That's less the issue.
But then there's Teams.
Then there's Teams, which doesn't allow you to shut it off. Don't get me started.
So was there another question that was really hot for you, Mauro, or you, Sandrine, or Skipper, or Graham, or Stefan?
I think I like hearing your questions. Honestly, everything that you're saying is very interesting. I'm a beginner in this area, so I wish I had a way to find like a manual, how to and how to use Zoom to the best, of its capacity, things like that.
I can think of a place, Sandri. There's a link here
May
somewhere.
we recommend a course? Skipper,
I have
had
a question. I do have a question. Because Rudy and I, when we were in the breakout, were saying how much, and you put it up there about how to put the slides behind you. But I don't use whatever platform that you created your slides in. I just use regular PowerPoint. And then usually on Zoom, I share screen and up goes the PowerPoint. And that's what I do. But I like what you did. And is there a way, if you how can you do that? Can you use regular PowerPoint and get the slides behind you?
Yes. So I use Google Slides because that helps me to share them quickly. And then
that's no different. We can use PowerPoint. There's no difference.
Okay.
It's fine.
So if you use PowerPoint.
But you can also do this. You can just save your PowerPoint slide as an image and use it as a virtual background. As long as you don't have too many.
Yeah, and actually in Teams now, you've got that facility to do, I think it's PowerPoint Live. That's a fairly new development. You can do a similar thing. You can use Prezi videos. And you posted a link to a video. I think there's 3 different ways, but there's lots of options. If you are technically adept and really want to take it to the nth level, I'll kind of mention this for some other people on the call might be interested. If you've seen the game, the sort of the people that do streaming and kind of streaming them playing video games, the software they usually use is something called OBS, Open Broadcast Studio. That allows you to do a whole myriad of stuff and transitions and scrolling thirds and live chat going up the side and all sorts of stuff. So if you want to be, do a huge amount, that's the way to go. But stuff like what Judy's using is dead simple, and you can use it with any platform as well, because it just creates a virtual webcam. So
I'm not really tech savvy. So I guess my question is, once you've created the PowerPoint, I understand what Judy's saying about make them a virtual background, and then I guess you can just advance them. But if you don't want to make them a virtual background, because sometimes, it does funny things with your image, to go with what she's talking about, this reesmccann.com, can you just help me understand? Do you go to that website and then do you create slides from that? I think I'm just not understanding how I take my PowerPoint and practically put it into the webinar.
Yeah. So on that link is a short article that I wrote answering your question.
Okay.
Rees McCann is myself and Steve. So we're not a software company. We just help people with online events. But on that link is an article which explains the step-by-step process.
Great. Thank you.
And Skipper, on this one, I want to chime in real quick. I don't use those. I share my slides. I do a keynote presentation and I share my slides. And then I stop. Right? I share my slides for a couple of minutes and then I turn it off. And then I share my slides and I turn it off. And I do that because it does some of what it's about, directing attention, right? So when I am sharing slides, often they're very content and concept heavy. I actually want people to be focused on that, not the group. So the tools that Judy's using are emphasize engagement with the group. Her slides are very, very light on text. They're very much about setting a context for a discussion, and she's facilitating a discussion, right? So just because a technique is really, really cool doesn't mean it's always exactly right. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with having a PowerPoint presentation and sharing that, as long as that's not all you're doing. And that when it's time for a discussion, people have got, it's
just a new thing that I had seen, and we both thought it was really cool. We just never seen it before. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good reminder.
Thanks.
Is the
all right?
Sorry, I just
Stefan.
Yeah. Thank you. So the course you are offering uses purely Zoom, or it's independent?
Platform neutral.
We're platform neutral. We don't mind what you use. This is more about the principles. A lot of the stuff we talk about would definitely benefit from having breakout rooms, but then again, Cisco WebEx is now just a Zoom copy. Breakout, and there are different ways of gathering people. Like you can use Welo space where people can move themselves into different spaces. But in terms of platforms, we don't subscribe to any particular one. Video Facilitator is another good one. It's a bit like is good, and Circle.es is another good one. I mean, there's loads.
So one of the things in the course is how do you choose your technology for your various events? It might be different for different events.
Okay, thanks.
People like Zoom, and most people are familiar with it, and it is good, but it's by no means the only one. There's other stuff out there that's even better for different things.
Or better in different ways.
Yeah, for different things, yeah. And then there's Teams. Go on, Gordon.
Teams is a lot better.
Teams is.
I was just going to say, Teams is getting a lot better. It is getting a lot better.
It is.
It still doesn't do dual monitor properly, which is the thing that still winds me up the most about it.
Any more for any more?
There was one thing Stefan and I disagreed about within our little group, which might be quite interesting to hear other people's opinions on. The suggestion I gave for kind of engaging webinars where there are large numbers of people, and it's not really set up for breakout rooms, it's mostly kind of a broadcast type event. I now encourage people to treat that webinar like a Netflix party. So you're watching the content, but you're using, if you've got specific questions, put them in the Q&A. But if you've just got, like we've been doing all the way through this event, observations, thoughts, links to other useful stuff, just encourage people to use the chat and do that during the event whilst the speaker is presenting. Because particularly with standard webinar type format where you've got the person presenting or the people presenting are on screen, but everybody else's cameras off and mics off, it can feel to the participants like you're the only one there. But by encouraging that kind of chat and conversation in the side, it actually gets people more engaged in what's going on and paying more attention. And I've been on a number of events now where either I've just simply been a participant or I've been facilitating and encouraged that behavior. And the feedback that I get afterwards is, oh, that was great. I really enjoyed it. Learned lots from other people on the webinar that normally you just would never get that chance to engage with. I agree, sort of doing properly interactive is better. But if you've got a webinar broadcasty type thing, you can get some engagement by doing that.
I'm pretty sure my view is going to be horses for courses. But Stefan, what was your contrary view? Sorry, Elise, I just wanted Stefan to say
that's exactly what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Well, to be honest, so when people are chatting, so they are not listening what is going on. So it's just like in any event, not online or offline, it doesn't matter. So if there is chit chat in the background, so people don't get what is going in the foreground. So that was my point. And you are right. So if you go somewhere where there are 1,000 people and you are not primarily interested what is going on in the foreground, but there are plenty of interesting people, that's perfect. That's perfect to do. Okay.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is the comments that you tend to get, as we have had here, are focused around the content that's being presented and around the conversation that's going on.
I'm going to say this is definitely it depends territory. I think for those who want to have and I'm going to take a wild and swinging guess that younger generations are much more used to having dual audio visual texting stuff going on and like it like that, and a lot of other people don't. And I think for don't, switch it off, focus on the speaker. For the do's, switch it off.
We have one participant who shows up to these things who literally can't hear anything if he's reading. Like that part of his brain just does not function. He doesn't like words and slides, doesn't want to see both of those things at once. And certainly when I facilitate high stakes conversations, we will disable the chat, which feels very odd to me as somebody who does these kinds of events more often. But especially when we're doing work with polarized groups, like intentionally combative groups.
That's
one conversation moderated in a healthy way is critical to the success. So there are times.
Yeah, fair point.
It depends.
Fun. Well,
thank you very much. So I really apologize. It's late evening here. So
yeah. It's time. I think we did it. Thank
you very much.
It's time to sweep the thing, put the chairs away, lights off.
Thank you so
much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, Lise. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Great as always.
Nice
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.